Before we listening to this section, I wanted to give you some context. After we reflected on Mark's comments about Jesus saying that we can receive whatever we want in prayer and so forth, we had a great discussion. There was a couple that was there not too long ago. They lost a child suddenly. And I wanted to tell you very quickly, because that's the context you're about to listen to. There are several things about this family that are so impressive. Several things. One of the things that's so impressive is that they are adamant, and they've always been adamant, that they're not going to abandon their faith. They're not going to stop being Christians because of this terrible, terrible tragedy. They have lived like Christians through it, and they have been through some hell. Not even just this, other things, but it's just... So the first very impressive thing is, here is a real-world example. And I know there are many, but they're not talked about, I think, enough. Usually in Christianity, we talk about all the bad examples, but when you talk about the good examples, these are people who are the good examples of living like Christians in the midst of terrible loss. It's so impressive. I mean, it's just, I wish you knew them. The second thing that's so impressive is they're reflecting critically on what to do with their Christian views. What I mean is, they're not just going, okay, whatever. Both of them are intelligent, and neither one wants pat answers, if that makes sense. Neither one wants to say, just give me the quick Band-Aid approach. They're really reflecting on this. And I'm so impressed by that. I'm just so impressed. When we go through terrible trauma, it is very easy to make everything simplistic and just want simple answers. But when we go through this when they have been this kind of traumatic experience, it reminds us that it's a great time to figure out really what you believe, and pat answers are not the way to do it. And I'm impressed that they have been seeking to do that. Another thing that really impresses me about them is that they really want to apply their Christian faith to the real world. And I hope that you know, if you're listening to this podcast, that this is my chief goal. These aren't just university lectures. I really believe this stuff, and I want, hopefully, to help it equip Christians act like Christians in the real world. I myself don't prefer pat answers and easy stuff, because I don't think reality is that way. I don't think Christianity is simple for a child. I think you need to explain things. Having said that, I really appreciate how this couple does the same thing. It seems to me. I don't know them that well, but what I know about them, they sure do. So I just hope that in this next section you'll remember that context and be as impressed as I am in their capacity to reflect carefully on these things. And then hopefully we can, at the end of it, encourage you. Not that we have all the answers, but I think you'll appreciate what they said as well. Maybe I'll give a pastoral anecdote that I think fits this, and you might not, but several years ago, I was praying for a job before I came here. And I struggled for a while, on and off for years, but really struggled for several months before praying much. I prayed, but not a whole lot. I had no problem praying for other people. Did that very often. I did have a problem praying for myself. And I always got bumped up against two or three major negative feelings and thoughts. One was, who am I? What difference does it make? There are starving people in the world. There are people who have horrible situations. And me to say, God, please give me a job or whatever, it sounded petty. And I struggle with that. And I also struggle with feeling that maybe I didn't have enough trust or confidence that he's going to do it anyway, so what difference does it make? I do believe God listens to our prayer. I did believe it. I do and did. And I did very much believe God can do, I think, anything logically possible. I guess I just wasn't as confident. And I had a couple other blocks maybe too. What I did not have was the confidence described in these verses of what Jesus is commanding, have faith in God. And what really hit me, and I hope and think it was God who did it. I remember that. I remember I was in the living room in Sugar Land, Texas. And it hit me one day, again, probably, hopefully with the Spirit. It wasn't Satan that said, and I was reminded of something I'd read all those times of the parables, particularly in Luke's gospel, when he tells the parable of the woman who goes to a judge at night, annoys the judge, or the guy who comes, a neighbor, a friend comes at night and beats on the door. I need some bread. They had guests, and so they went and said, hey, give me some food. They just annoyed the snot out of the person. He says, if that works for that person, how much more does your God hear you? You've got to keep going. And I remember the passage, of course, when he says, how many of you will give your child the wrong thing? Basically, remember, who gives a snake instead of a loaf, or fish, a stone instead of a bread, rather, and a snake instead of fish? Who would do that? And the answer is nobody. And all those things I heard and studied all my life, they just congealed together. I realized I was not taking that seriously. I had the basic assumption that God the Father was not being my father, that he was much more like a critical parent who was ticked off at me for asking something petty. And all of a sudden I had this light feeling of God the Father being a father figure who said, please just ask me, and please let me figure out what I want to give you. And then all of a sudden it came rushing to me, my own children, and I thought, that's exactly what I tell my children. I imagine my children going all my life, 20 years down the road, and they go, and I found out in a deep conversation, all those years I wanted to ask you for these 5 billion things I lined up, whatever, and I never asked you. Why didn't you ask me? I was scared to ask you. They sounded petty at the time. And I would say, why didn't you trust me to decide whether or not it was the right thing for you? It's also problematic that says, ask whatever you want. I thought, well, come on, I did my prayer studies on that. It can't be true for that. It's not whatever you want. It can't be, because Jesus himself asked for the cup to be passed for him in Mark 14, and the cup wasn't passed for him. Now, Jesus also asked, not my will, but yours. He did, that's right. But he wanted the Father's will, he did, and he wanted not for it to happen that way. He wanted the end, but not the means. He disagreed with God the Father's strategy. He had the same vision, but a different strategy. So, I mean, I could go on and on. These are examples where it can't mean that, like a genie in the bottle, whatever you want, because you have to submit whatever you want to him. And then be confident that whatever you ask prayer that's according to what he wants, it's going to happen.
When you ask God for something, he will give it to you if it's what he wants. If it's in his will. And I've, particularly in the last 6 months, turn that around. Well, okay, so if I ask for something he doesn't want it, I'm not going to get it. He's only going to get what he wants. I've become whatever you want. I just quit. I quit asking, and he's going to do what he wants anyway.
He will do whatever he wants. He will. C.S. Lewis helped me on that exact point, which I know we texted very briefly. C.S. Lewis really helped me on the exact point you just did, because Lewis talks about this in a couple places about that. There's an essay called the essay in a collection of essays called on the efficacy of prayer, in an essay collection called the weight of glory, which is another name of an essay. The efficacy of prayer, that is, does it really work? And that absolutely helped me. In short, the Bible demonstrates, and I would dare say logic demonstrates, I'm convinced God the Father and Son and Spirit, they know from all the foundation of the world what will occur. I also think they know what free-willed individuals will choose. I think it's also possible they have what's called middle knowledge. I'm not exactly convinced about this yet, but there are people who are convinced that God not only knows what we will do of our own free will, he knows what we would have done in different circumstances. If I didn't marry Elaine, would I have ever gotten married? Who would I have married? Would I have different children? People who believe in middle knowledge said that he knows every conceivable, called counterfactual. Well, forget counterfactuals for a second, though. What would have happened if? And just say, God knows what will happen. It means God knows what we will ask for as well, and will consider it in his divine plan. The Bible, to me, is really clear. There's many examples where, from Abraham to Jesus, whatever, that he prays for something, or the early church, they pray for things, and then it occurs. And that we're commanded to do it. And to pray in this basic level in Greek just means ask for. So it has to be the case that God actually takes what we want into consideration. And I personally, I prefer the words I just used a second ago, that they're not biblical, but I think it fits it well. To say it this way, I'm convinced God, the Father, Son, and Spirit, they know the end. They know exactly where it will end up. They are negotiable on the strategy. So when Jesus says, I want what you will, not what I will, we all agree on what the end is. But I disagree with the strategy. Is there any other way we can get to point A to point Z? in that regard, on his response to that prayer requested, the answer is by God the Father has to be no. No. I mean, there's many ways to get from here to Austin, Texas, but there's one way we're going to do it. It's going to accomplish something that I need to accomplish. Maybe it's to ride the airplane miles one more time to gather to whatever it is. So then the question is, does that mean, so to reiterate that, it means I'm convinced, and again, you might want to read that essay, and it's online, I'm sure, for free, and it's not that long. But I'm convinced, based on the Bible and based on, I think, good, sound Orthodox theology, God certainly is real. He does listen. He does care. He does know what we will freely ask for, and he does consider it, you might say, ahead of time. He does know exactly what we're asking, and he puts in part of his plans. So, then why even pray in the first place? Because he could take your genuinely free will into consideration. There's many ways to get from here to Wichita. God knows every conceivable way, and he'd go, oh, he wants to walk. Okay, I would have chosen it, but we're going to get to Wichita. That's going to happen. And so when people talk about God's not sovereign that way. I completely disagree. He's completely sovereign because he knows how the whole show's going to end. He knows all of our destinies, all of our lives, every second, exactly where he wants to put us eventually. And he'll make sure our strategies fit his enough to get the end result. That's my view, but I think it's backed by Scripture, and maybe there are other views out there, but I think that's the one's the fairest to the text.
And then there's the kind of the other side. With free will, we have free will to do whatever, but I have a hard time. At one time I thought it was clear,
Amen.
But I have a hard time now. Okay, they seem two opposites almost. That free will to do whatever we want, but yet it's already planned out, and this is the way it has to be. And I'm not going to change it. You can ask, can't change it. One time I thought, well, he would change. He could change.
I agree that it can be this. Lord knows I don't have it all figured out, but I've spent a lot. I'm not defending myself, therefore I'm saying I'm right. I'm saying I concur with the struggle because I spent years reading a lot of material on this to try to get some kind of resolution. In my mind and heart thus far, I do have more resolution.
And then that's why I texted you the other night. I've always thought that, yeah, God can intervene in this and that, but then I kind of spent some time, well, free will, or it's going to, and then, like the other night, the reason I texted you that the other night is because with my knife at work, I slipped and cut into a 480 volt line. And I don't know how it was like a box cutter with a little blade like that. And that blade was just gone. It was like a fuse, a big fuse. When it did that, it went pow! And that blade was gone. Wow. And I don't know how. It didn't hurt me at all. I felt nothing.
That's amazing.
Absolutely nothing. That blade it just disintegrated.
Yeah, golly. The blade instead of you.
And, yeah. So what, maybe there probably is legitimate reasons as to how I didn't get hurt. Maybe because of my shoes, I wasn't grounded. Maybe the blade, acted as a fuse quick enough. I don't know.
It's a good point. There's different ways. Philosophers just define free will in different ways. And I think I've talked about in the study before. I don't know if you probably weren't there at one of the studies, but it seems to me, I take quite frankly, just the standard traditional approach to it, which is a will is free when it is not coerced by an outside force. That is, no one's making me do it. But that's it. That's the notion. That's all it takes for it to be free. If you take it, there's different ways if you take a different route, you know, free means you might say absolutely free. And no, God is absolutely free. I'm not free to think like a horse. I'm not free to feel like a woman. I'm not any of those things. I don't identify as a horse or woman. I don't care what, if I do, I'm crazy. Quite frankly. I'm white, I'm male. I grew up in the South, Mississippi. We were poor. Then I got jobs, whatever it is. So my history influences my choices and my appetites. Clearly it does. Nevertheless, my will is completely free in that I'm convinced nothing and no one is forcing me to sit here, look at you. No one's making me do it. No one's telling me to. You say, put a gun to your head. That's not forcing me to do it. You put a gun to my head. I can choose to keep talking or I can be quiet if you threaten me. I'm still choosing to do it. You can coerce my will based on my psychological state. Yep, I still have the freedom. Coercion is not the same. And so free will means nothing is controlling my will. That's how I understand it. That is the traditional thought. God is that way plus. Nothing and no one coerces, ever forces God's hand. He is literally and logically, and I'm convinced, the only legitimately free being there is. He has no constraints whatsoever. There's logical constraints like he can't make mistakes, but that's not a limitation. It's a signs of perfection. Okay, I'm going with that is, frankly, I like the analogy of adults to children. And Lewis doesn't talk, but I do. My children have free will, or your children, I'll use mine just to pick on mine. My children have free will. I'm convinced of it. At no point can I ever change the fact that their will stays free. In their childhood, in their life, in a normal week, which is like normal routine of school and this and that, there are certain things that I guarantee will occur. I will influence them. I will advise them. I will coerce them. I will threaten them with punishment. I'll do all kinds. I know for a fact they're going to go to sleep. They're going to brush their teeth. That kind of stuff. I'm going to make sure the chores are done at some point. I will have to tell them, almost certainly. I'll have to, no, go do that. I'll have to tell them multiple times sometimes. I might have to raise my voice. Y'all knock it off. Stop arguing. I will deliberately act in such a way to influence their decisions to get the outcome that I want. And it's perfectly moral to do so because I have the office of parent. God has office of God. He is fully just and fully justified in coercing us any way he wants to get the desired outcome he wants. God is phenomenal and kind, like his mom and dad, like we are, in that we actually want to hear what our kids have to say. There are several ways to get their chores done. There are several ways to get the same object, and we ask those things all the time. Like, here's what's going to happen. You're going to do your chores today. When do you want to do it? How do you want them done? You're going to get them done. Okay, I'm going to get them. I'm going to play for 7 hours and do it 10 and 11. Okay, they will get it accomplished by the end, or here are the consequences. Nothing made them do it. You see my point. So there are certain, I keep thinking of the right word, almost like stopping points in their life. There are roadblocks or whatever. I will deliberately put up that's what healthy parents do, right? You don't hit or you don't whatever. No, you fuss your kids. They get grounded. Certain things are going to happen. Certain things won't happen. There are roadblocks.
But you can't make them not hit.
But I can't make them not hit. I know consequences. Yeah. Exactly. That's where I was going. I can't make them. I can shove it down their mouth, but I'm still not controlling their will. They're still they're doing all they can to stop it. They're still choosing not to eat. I'm forcing food down their mouth. I cannot conquer their will. All I can do is influence. That's all I can do. And most Christian thinkers and theologians, philosophers, forever, for 2,000 years, have concurred. It's precisely the same thing with God. God has absolute control over everything but humans' free will. It is genuinely, he has designed us to be people who cannot be controlled. He can cajole, he can woo, as Lewis says, but he cannot override. To which people will say, no, David, no, the Apostle Paul, he met him on the road to Damascus and knocked him off his donkey and whatever. That has nothing to do with Paul's free will. That was a roadblock. And he has every right to jump in there and do something. Every single time God does a miracle, every single time, it's just saying, I'm going to put a stop in that stream, another roadblock, because this has to happen. I will make this happen. But he will never coerce, he will not override a person's will. It seems to me. It seems to me both biblically and logically. Now, there are people who disagree with me. They're called Calvinist Reform. I completely disagree with them. Love is not forced, and that's exactly what he wants with us is love. He wants love. Now, love is manifested in obedience toward God. That's what he wants. But love and obedience must be uncontrolled. Therefore, it is the very definition of love. You say, well, that's an American English term. No, Biblical, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, pick any word you want. For that to occur, it must be free. And he will never make us not be able to love at any second. but it doesn't mean he doesn't have full office and authority to put roadblocks and to bring the whole show to the end whenever he wants to. Judgment time is going to happen. And he will take our free will and what we've done with it in our lifetime and reward or punish accordingly. Even in the world to come, we do not lose the ability to we are still not forced to do what I will. It's just now we won't be influenced by Satan and evil and corruption and nonsense and sadness and our indigestion and our sicknesses and cancers and whatever. We won't be influenced by that stuff. It will be a perfected will, and that it'll be also free from all that negative influence, and we'll be in the joy that we'll ever know. So, I do think God exists. God is still sovereign by putting up any kind of roadblock he wants, just as much as a parent does it with children. It is, I would dare say, it's a moral necessity on God's part. It's a moral necessity because we sin. It's like saying to my kids, you can do whatever you want to do. I told the other day, just the other day, something was messy. I mean, it's kind of comes, your girls might leave food out, whatever. I said, y'all would live nasty if you didn't have parents. I mean, kids would live disgusting. And they looked at me all shocked. I said, you would live gross. Y'all. Joey said, I don't need forks. That's what it was. Now, because I do the dish almost all the time. Now they kind of unload or whatever. I said, they're cleaning the dishwasher. You hadn't taken them out yet. And there was something else that was plates left, food on. And I was going, and I said, that's my point. I'm sovereign with Mama. We're co-sovereigns. And my point is, if they were let well and wild, like with God with us, we would live nasty, horrible lives. But Jesus commanded you, brother. He commanded you, ask. He's a good father. He won't give you stones and snakes. He might say no. That's because that strategy is not what he wants, or the end is not what he wants. But can you trust him that what he does give you is good? What he gives you is good. What he gives you is not a snake, and those things harm you. It hurts. It might kill you to eat rocks. He's saying, no. What he gives you is always good. What he says no to is always good. How do I know that? Because God is good. He can't do something bad or evil or stupid or incompetent. When he says no, it's a good thing. And this is where most atheists go, well, David, explain to me then, what's the good in the tsunamis? I do not need to articulate to people. I don't even need to know why those things are good to know they are good. Well, that's a cop-out. It is not a cop-out. If Elaine didn't show up, she showed up late for some meeting. Where is she now? Whatever the reason is a good one. Y'all came late. I call. Whatever it is, it's a good one. But I was afraid it's because of a car wreck, because of the ice, right? I thought, I don't go, they don't exist, or they're villains. I don't start calling you names and cussing. I don't go, to heck with none of that. My gut reaction is, absolutely, they're going to come. They said number one, I trust them. Two, I wonder if something happened. Now, why would I do that? It's because I know you a little bit. And that's exactly what I say to anybody who's skeptical about Christianity. I know God a little bit. I know enough to know he's good and trustworthy. But I called and they didn't answer. I called both of them, didn't answer. They don't exist. I just stopped calling. Elaine came around the corner. I wouldn't call ever again. Why even call? They don't even answer. Don't ever call again for the rest of your entire life. What if you didn't show ever? Like I had all this stuff set up. You didn't show up and it was extremely inconveniencing and the kids had to stay up late and they cleaned for hours and you still didn't. And it was just, it was awful. Would I still conclude that I should never call you ever again or never speak to you ever again? I mean, I hope you would say, I hope not. If the role reversed, I would say, oh my Lord, I hope you know me a little bit to say there had to have been a good reason. Jesus said, pray. I think God does take it in consideration. He is still sovereign. When he intercedes with miracles, it's because he's trying to roadblock or change the stream flow of history. Well, who is he? He's God. He can do whatever he wants to do. But why doesn't he change the stream all the time? Because he doesn't want to. The stream is going in such a direction that it accomplishes his will. Well, God didn't explain to me how the stream, I'm trying to go with the skeptical part. Well, he didn't explain to me why the stream has to go that way. No, he doesn't. The Bible's full of people who didn't know what in the world he was doing.
Or maybe you're not thinking this, but yeah, ultimately, yeah,
Well,
God does have the power to stop it, but
It was allowed by God. Nothing happens unless it's allowed. He's not going to say, man, I didn't expect that to happen. I wasn't going to have that happen. That wasn't my plan. Mm-hmm. If it happens, it's because did what he wanted or what he allowed. But I mean, I don't know. I haven't lost any faith as far as God. I know God's still there. Maybe before I felt like I had more influence with Him than I actually do. Mm-hmm. I realized that in a hard way.
Mm-hmm. I understand exactly what you mean. That makes perfect sense. In my opinion, especially when you would, I guess, almost hope or expect that what you're praying for is a good thing. As you almost think, surely this would be something he'd say, yeah, that's an easy one. Of course the answer is yes.
Yeah. And I can try to see how, okay, maybe I can't see the good, but I could see how God could use it for good. And then us being human, we try the whole donate life thing. We try to make our own, make it worth it or put meaning to it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know either for a fact, but I do know that when we were sitting in the room and they brought up organ donation, I don't know why, but it immediately hit me because the whole time when this was happening, actually at first I thought for some crazy reason that he was going to live, because at Lawrence Memorial they were like, they got his heart to beat again, and I'm like, oh, thank God it's over. Like, I just kept saying, thank God, thank God. Yeah. I remember I was on my knees and everything, and then it goes all downhill from there. But when they tell me this, then I'm like, that's it, that's the reason. I don't know why, but something inside me was telling me, this is it. This is what you went through all of this for. Even though it sucks for us, it gave life to somebody else. I was just convinced. And then the fact that nothing in his brain was working except for the front part of the brain that allows your heart to beat. That was all that was working. I don't find that coincidental. I find that of God, that he said, I know somebody out here that needs a heart, so this is what I'm going to do here in order to make this work over here, because they've been praying for this long. And I just feel like there's too many things throughout that I was like, I know this is it. I know this is it. So it kind of like helped me get, I mean, I know I can't sit here and say for a fact, yeah, God came down here and he talked to me. But, when you're in, as crazy as sounds, in tune enough with the Holy Spirit, I feel like you will know when you're being told by God and when you're being told by Satan. You know what I'm saying? Does that sound crazy?
No.
But yeah, so that's why I feel a lot better about the whole thing, because I feel like this is what it was meant to be. Not that it makes it easy that he's gone, but it's a very hard time, because I think after 48 years of most of your life having gone through terrible things, it's like, when does it end? Yeah. Surely it's not when we go to heaven, because a lot of these Christian songs are all about home, like Chris Tomlin's Home and everything. Well, that's not what we should be looking forward to. Is let's get through all this bull crap so that we could, you know what I'm saying?
I'm a lot like you, and I don't have it that bad. I've been through some stuff. But there's people who's been through a lot worse, and I understand that. I'm appreciative of that, and I try to keep that in mind. That there's people that don't have anything, don't even have food, don't have shelter, don't have anything, and haven't ever.
Right.
And I have a lot, really. Just
that's true, and to encourage you, I did a blog on that exact issue of negative thoughts. I find it very helpful when we are obsessing or focusing on negative thoughts that most people will consider petty, but one way to test the pettiness is try to tell the story to someone at Auschwitz. Tell some starving kid in Africa and say, can you believe I lost my keys? I mean, give me a high five. You know what I'm talking about. I mean, it would be like that sounds stupid. I should just shut up. I'm bickering. But as I say in the blog, and I'm going to say in the podcast, that's not everything in life. There are things in life for which it is truly bad. It is truly sorrowful. It is truly traumatic. So, and I say this again in the blog several times, I'm not saying everything falls in that category, but it is a quick test to go, if I'd said, I lost my baby to Auschwitz, that's stinking sad. they would still say, I'm so very, if they're human, I'm very sorry. That does, in fact, and my point, you see, they're still traumatic. So while it is true there are people who have it worse and you've been through hard things in life, it is true that people, sure, I guess worse, whatever that means. But it doesn't mean, the corollary is not, therefore my feelings were invalid. Those are very different things. It can be both true that people have experienced horrible, worse things and you had a crappy situation. I went through some really bad, I have been through some really, really rough times in my life. People have been through much worse in life. But the stuff I've been bad through has been bad enough for me. That's my first encouragement to you, is that just because they people are worse doesn't mean you haven't been through something bad yourself. The second thing I'd say is, what I have found very frustrating, personally, is when you go through a lot of bad things because people have made bad choices that are not your fault and it affects you. That's been very devastating for me. I know, for me, in my worldview, I say the word no. I know they're not God's fault. I know they occurred because someone of free will chose an evil choice. Sometimes it was an accident and it still caused me pain. Other times it was an evil choice or multiple evil choices that caused me pain. And I'm still extremely angry at the people who did it to me. Part of me has struggled at times to be mad at God, like, yeah, but where are you? To which my mind then goes, where was he, dummy? That's not his fault at all. They chose to do that. But my key, though, is part of me still wants to be mad at God, and I like to take this on the positive side and say, like when Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? To say, I feel so close to him, I wanted him to make it better. And so what he's told me many times, at least from Scripture and personally, is I can make it better by helping comfort you now. I cannot take away what I did to you. I have made humans such that I will, from the mountaintops, literally, metaphorically, I will scream out advice. I cannot make them take it. I can't. And so instead of picturing God, quote, up there going, ha ha ha, I'm so glad they hurt you, I think it devastates him. I think every single time they choose sinful behavior or hurt someone else, it's devastating. I don't know if God feels devastation, but I mean, an immense a way of making it so where humans can understand the concept. He hates it. I mean, they use the word in the Bible, he hates sin, right? He hates it. He doesn't like it. So he's not happy when murderers murder and people do things or betray or get addicted and don't want to get off addictions. Not people who just get addicted. I mean, they don't want to ever, or they know it causes pain, or they hurt people physically. All my encouragement is that that's sometimes my very big discouragement. Even though I know it's true, I still feel like, as a Heavenly Father, like, but come comfort me now. I'm still upset that those things happened to me. Like, where were you? Where were you when those things happened? And my response in my mind was, he's right there with me. Of course he is. God is not absent anywhere. That's a silly thing. The question is, I wanted to be rescued from all the time. And the way he's designed the whole show is that humans are not rescued from other people's free will. They're just not. It is a good that we are not. It is a good. It means you are legitimately responsible for me and I for you. That's the only way to have real moral choices. If I'm not really responsible for you, there's no sense of morality. So I have to be able to hurt you and love on you to demonstrate that it is in fact love and therefore a moral choice, and do the good, do the right. And he doesn't every once in a while zap a person. I don't think he does. Zap a person and go, all of a sudden I can only do good. I just don't think that. Ever. I think that will never happen ever. In fact, so much so, I'm convinced that for him to do that means you're no longer human. I'm convinced that the human soul by default is a free-willed being. I think it cannot change. People, why don't you just make Hitler not do that? He's literally no longer a human being. He would be a creature unlike ever attested as far as we know in the history of existence. He would no longer be a free-willed human being. Well, the conversation isn't finished. You can always reach out to me on social media. Are you on Facebook? I am too. At Glimpse of the Kingdom. Glimpse of the Kingdom on Facebook. Be sure to like it and you can see updates there. Also, if you're on Twitter, check me out at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass, or at Glimpse the King, at Glimpse the King. And I try my best to respond to comments and questions on there as quickly as I can. If you want more, there are many more resources on the podcast and my blog. Go to my website, davidpendergrass.com, and you can see a full list of the podcast, and my blog is available for free. Are you active in a church right now? I'd be happy to come out to your church and do all kinds of classes and workshops there. Check out davidpendergrass.com, davidpendergrass.com for more information. And may God in His great grace give you even just a glimpse of His kingdom this week. See you next time.